Welcome back. The Atlantic bubble is not making its much anticipated return next week. Starting Monday, people were supposed to be able to travel freely within the region without isolating, but the premiers have decided to delay it by at least 2 weeks. Blaine Higgs is the Premier of New Brunswick. He joins us now from Fredericton. Hi, Premier. Good to see you as always. Thank you for making the time.
You're very welcome.
So ultimately, what was the deciding factor?
Well, certainly the case count that we have in the northwestern part of the province has been an ongoing issue. We have about 132 cases, so that is down. Our numbers today were only 4. So that is an improvement. So we're seeing a kind of a steady situation there. There are some, issues in Nova Scotia as well and PEI. So basically, it seemed like it was a little premature, given what we have, and certainly with what we're seeing across the country, and with our situation in the Northwest. So we collectively agreed that we would just hold off for a couple of weeks. We're going to have a meeting in another week's time to kind of do an assessment. We're actually working with public health very closely in coordinating between the respective Atlantic provinces so that we can open and all have the same rules when we do so.
Was there a specific recommendation from either your or any other province's public health team that to specifically say now is not the time?
Well, I think certainly it was a kind of a mutual understanding that now wasn't the time. Even though for New Brunswick, I mean, we're saying stay in the zone. We have that lockdown zone and not be moving around. It was kind of contrary to open up to the other provinces, and then while people were saying don't move around in that area. But, I think our situation is real here. We still have a lot of people that travel the border regularly. And, as an example, we have 3,000 truck drivers in our province, and they're traveling regularly, and only about 800 of them are vaccinated at this point, even though we've asked for everyone to be vaccinated. So it's kind of a call out to our truck drivers to, get vaccinated. We have the vaccines to do that and to minimize our exposure for people that have to travel every day, because we appreciate they're an essential service and we value it greatly. And we just need them to be as safe as possible in doing so.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, just more generally speaking, I mean, as you head towards, let's say, the possibility of opening up in 2 weeks, how much of a factor is what's happening outside of the Atlantic bubble? Like the third wave is hitting extremely hard. We know how contagious these variants are. As you mentioned, there is trade that takes place. It's not like, I mean, you're a bit of a vacuum, but not a complete one. Is it even a guarantee in 2 weeks that you know what I mean, that won't be a factor?
No, it's not a guarantee at all. I mean, we certainly have seen that throughout this pandemic, every week it can be defined by itself and an action that we didn't really plan on. And so for us, trying to mitigate that exposure in relation to essential travel, that's what we'll watch. And I mean, we've been guarding the border, as we know, in between Quebec and New Brunswick and Maine and New Brunswick, and we have to continue that diligence. And the more people we have vaccinated that are traveling every day for essential service, the better we're going to feel. But if the conditions continue to worsen in our neighboring provinces, to in Quebec and Ontario and such, it will have an impact on what we do. But I would say that right now we're hopeful that that'll strengthen in our own provinces, and then it'll just be a case of, can we manage the border control well enough to allow the bubble to open once again in early May.
And what about something we've spoken about before, and same with Premier King from PEI, the possibility of just given the importance of tourism during the summer, or opening up that bubble to the rest of Canada. I acknowledge it's not the easiest thing to predict right now, given what's going on, but do you still have some hope for the summer?
I will remain hopeful. I mean, we all have family. We all have, we want to get back into our national identity again and be traveling across our country. So, yeah, I'm going to remain hopeful. And that hope is, I guess, will spring off of our ability to vaccinate. And I'm hopeful that we'll get more vaccines from the U.S. If they're caught up and they meet the targets they're planning in this month and in April, then let's hope more vaccines will come our way, because we still are able to vaccinate probably double of what we have for supply. And that will make the key difference for our ability to open up to the rest of the country.
Okay, Premier, before I let you go, I just want to switch topics and ask you about another significant announcement in your province today. You announced that you're pulling out of tax sharing agreements with 13 First Nations. Some of my colleagues out in New Brunswick have spoken to some of the leaders of those First Nations who said that they were basically floored by the announcement. They had a brief conference call with the finance minister after the media briefing was already underway. They didn't have a chance to pose any questions. Why would you make an announcement of this significance in that manner?
Well, firstly, I think it's important to realize these are 5-year agreements that are commercial in nature. They're not related to any treaty rights or Aboriginal rights as such. They were commercial in nature. They're put in place to have, back in '94, to have First Nations collect tax. It is a total refund of taxation of provincial taxes. So 95% of provincial taxes are refunded on any business on a First Nations land. And in relation to that, it's a case of, okay, we have to put in place the defined time frame is there on the contractual agreement. So we have to basically say, okay, are we going to renew or not renew? And we're saying, no, we can't. This is not sustainable. We're talking about a refund here that is now $45 million a year of provincial taxes that are used for everyone, including First Nations, for schools and hospitals. This is completely unique in the country. There's nothing like this anywhere in the country. It is solely based on something to get First Nations to charge tax and have equity between businesses across the province, whether First Nations or not. So it needs to be addressed. It's unsustainable. And we're willing to sit down and have those frank discussions about here's the reality of what we have to deal with. But we want all First Nations to prosper. But I think one needs to understand the uniqueness of this and how important it is to get a meaningful discussion underway. We can't really just talk about it. We need to fix it for everyone in our province. And the First Nations need to be part of that.
Yeah, and certainly, Premier, I'm not trying to take away from, perhaps, I'm sure there is a legitimate debate to have about the sustainability of these types of agreements. But when you say that, you have to sit down with First Nations and talk about that, or even arrive at a different set of agreements or a different tax sharing agreement, whatever it happens to be, how would you expect them to feel as though you're entering into any of that in good faith when they found out the way they did today and they weren't given the opportunity to ask any questions?
Well, there isn't really, at this point, the time is now to ask questions because each contract has a timeline. And I mean, there are some of them that have 90 days and there are 6, 7 of them that have 1 year. So this is like a notice based on the provisions within the contract. And I don't think it really came as a surprise, maybe the timing as such, but the time for us to have discussions is now over the next year and over the next 90 days, because this puts a focus on it. This is real. This is something that's not sustainable for the province, and it's expanding dramatically.
But respectfully, why wouldn't you have those?
Respectfully,
sorry to interrupt, but why wouldn't you have those conversations or try and arrive at those new arrangements with the affected First Nations prior to just saying, this is it, it's done, it's over?
Well, I think the point to make here, Vashi, is that this isn't about a consultation process. This is about a commercial agreement that is unique to New Brunswick. And, we could spend our time talking about it, but we need to fix it. And so right now, where it's clear that we cannot afford as a province to renew this in its current fashion, and we must sit down and talk about it, everyone's going to be interested in finding a solution, as we are. But it's, it's not going to be about, well, we'll meet next month or we meet 2 months from now. It's like, okay, time is of the essence. It's a provincial issue. It's a First Nations issue. And we need to find a solution. And we said, both the minister and myself, our door's always open. We're ready to meet. And we've already had some contact in that regard. So I'm hopeful that we'll have real focus on a result that benefits all New Brunswickers.
And again, I'm not taking away from what you hope to achieve in the end. But do you admit or do you regret the way in which your government approached it today? The idea that certain leaders were, quote unquote, floored by the announcement?
No, I don't regret that part, Vashi. And I'll tell you why. We wanted to have all of the information on the table so people in the province could see what we're facing as a government, what we're facing as a revenue loss in our province that could be $100 million a year. It's projected to be $1 billion of cumulative payments that have been refunds of taxes. This is not sustainable. So in order to have that information very public, very real of what actually the situation is, it gets out there before the emotion starts. And I know it's an emotional issue, but it's a reality issue. So in order for us to have everything on the table so everyone can look at it and say, wow, you really do need to fix this, Now we have everyone understanding the problem. Now we look for solutions.
Okay, Premier, I'm out of time. I'll leave it there. I appreciate your time as always. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Blaine Higgs
Good night.
is the Premier of New Brunswick. Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.